Breakdown of the seventh step of alcoholics. Anonymous humility. We humbly asked him to free us from our defects. We humbly ask God to free us from our shortcomings. In this step, as mentioned in the heading, humility is essential, as it will enable us to combat many of our character flaws, especially pride, which tops the list of these flaws. The goal of all 12 steps of recovery is aimed at gradually finding a degree of humility in each of them, because without it, it will be impossible for us to live a useful and happy life. Humility will lead us to sobriety, which is very different from simply abstaining. A teetotaler is someone who has stopped drinking, but has not stopped suffering. They are not even a person who has grown personally and spiritually. They are an individual who has simply settled for stopping drinking and whose personal life is still a disaster. Humility as an ideal or concept means saying and accepting the truth about ourselves, recognizing our faults and shortcomings, and admitting that as humans, we have flaws, but also virtues that we can take advantage of. In theory, this sounds very easy, but putting it into practice has been very difficult for many of us because no one likes to be told the truth. There is always denial and evasion of our truth because the truth about ourselves as sick people causes us shame and revulsion towards ourselves. The word humility has been greatly misrepresented and mistreated in the world, as this concept is attributed to a person who has no material possessions. That is to say, it is believed that a humble person is someone who has no money, or who simply allows themselves to be walked all over by others, who has no character, or, failing that, does not know how to set boundaries. Rather, what people are talking about is pride, since this makes us talk about achievements and boastfulness in our lives, even when many of these things are not true. It is believed that science will eventually give us the utopia that the individual has, which will provide us with everything we need so that we do not have to strive in material, emotional, sexual, and social matters. But this perception of life is far from reality. Pride has played a trick on us, causing us to look down on others and feel superior to them at certain moments in our lives. We thought we were winning at life, but then came the decline and we ended up failing in life. Many AA members think that happiness in life is the satisfaction of our instincts. That is, that happiness is found in money, a partner, family, a good job, children, among other things. We have not entered into controversy with these types of foolish individuals, as the experience of thousands of alcoholics has shown us that this belief has only led them to resounding failure in their way of thinking and living. As sick people, if we have suffered for anything, it is because of our demands. We believe we deserve everything, but we have never given anything. We are extremely narcissistic and selfish people who only think about our own pleasure or benefits, failing to see other people. We have confused the means with the end of each of our instincts, because although we do not, it is wrong to have material progress in our lives. Even many alcoholics and drug addicts who have been obedient to spiritual principles have told us how God has blessed them in this regard. However, when we believe that the purpose of life is to make money at all costs, that is where we become disoriented, and many AA members return to drinking or using drugs because they devote themselves so much to working and working that they forget the responsibility of their recovery. The priority in their lives is only to make money. But this belief and way of thinking has only brought the individual negative results. All our lives we have believed that we have had a good character in front of others in the situations that arise in our daily lives. However, when humility was explained to us in AA, we realized that we would have to sacrifice many of our personal desires, and so we preferred the comfort of continuing to act, think, and speak in the same way, since we did not have enough honesty and humility to accept and correct our faults. It never occurred to us to have values such as tolerance, honesty, love of neighbor, and love of God as a code of life, so as not to get ourselves into so many entanglements in life. The more stubborn and obstinate we are, thinking that our intelligence and willpower are the only things we need to get ahead in life, the more stumbling blocks we will encounter, many of which we will not be able to overcome, since even at this point we were still trying to play God, believing that we did not need Him. We have fought tooth and nail for our self-sufficiency because we think that it will put us at the top of success in all areas of our lives, and we leave God out of our lives. But when the inevitable fall comes in our lives, we will have to realize that we lack the main ingredient, which is humility. So practicing this step means to let His will be done and not ours, since in this sense we are recognizing that if something goes well, it will be thanks to Him, and if it does not, it is for our own good. Let us remember that we have to work as if everything depended on us, but the result and the final decision must always be left to God as each of us conceives Him. Many of us have had to go through very painful experiences to understand that humility is what will help us overcome all our problems. We have had to learn to be humble on many occasions, not out of choice or conviction, but out of necessity. For if anything has caused us to suffer, it has been the selfishness that prevents us from speaking, much less accepting, the truth about our lives. It has taken us a long time to accept the concept of humility in our lives and recognize that we must rid ourselves of our selfishness, which is the greatest obstacle to overcome in this fierce spiritual struggle. We recognize that humility is not about submitting ourselves or letting others walk all over us. On the contrary, humility would bring us the freedom of spirit that we have sought in our lives. It is not possible to make a 180-degree turn in the blink of an eye from a lifetime spent satisfying our egocentric desires, since at first, rebellion hinders every step we try to take. Despite recognizing that we had to be humble in our lives, we wanted to continue clinging to many of our character defects that have given us pleasure, and we were reluctant to start working on them. We chose to let time pass, thinking that they would fade away, but that has not been the case. All we have done is postpone our responsibility to face each of our character defects. The question many of us asked was, how can we really find the will to get rid of these character defects? The answer is that, unfortunately, many of our flaws have to make us unhappy and miserable before we begin to want to change our lives. At this stage of our progress, we feel strongly pressured to do the right thing, forced to choose between the suffering of trying and the certain punishment of not doing so. We take these first steps on the path reluctantly, but we take them nonetheless. We may not yet hold humility in very high esteem as a desirable personal virtue, but we nevertheless realize that it is a necessary aid to survival. When we discuss our character defects with another person, that is, when we sponsor each other, we begin to feel a sense of inner peace, and it is then that we realize that humility within a sponsorship is part of the process in which we must be as honest as we can be in order to get out of the hell we have always been in. At this point in sponsorship, we realize that humility, far from being humiliating before another human being, will be the tool that leads us to the freedom and true spiritual strength that many of us have needed to move forward. Sponsorship completely deflates our ego, and we realize why we never liked being confronted face to face with our character defects. The reason is that many of these defects have caused us a lot of pain, and we have chosen to forget them because, let's remember, human beings shy away from pain like the plague. It is normal for all of us to have tried to avoid certain episodes in our lives because of the pain that would be involved in reviving these episodes, but we had to do it with as much honesty as possible in order to begin our journey in AA. The main change we had was our attitude toward God, since whenever we sought Him, it was out of necessity and not out of gratitude for the things that happened in our lives. We had the humility to realize that our way of thinking about Him was wrong, and our communication with God became more organic and natural since when we prayed, it was often out of convenience or force. But now the words, "By myself I am nothing, the Father does the work," began to take on a very promising meaning. We have realized that humility can be found not only in the suffering or pain caused by our character flaws, but also in the obedience we must have to our spiritual principles. At first, we had to practice humility out of necessity, but over time, we practiced it because we enjoyed living this way. When putting this step into practice, we have to ask ourselves what we really want to achieve and what our goals are, since our character flaws are obstacles and personal desires that we must overcome. We now see clearly that we have imposed unreasonable demands on ourselves, on other people, and on God. Fear and self-centeredness prevented us from growing in this way, as we were afraid of not having what we wanted or of not obtaining it. So we had to reduce our demands, which prevented us from living peacefully throughout our lives. It is clear that a demand is not the same as a simple, honest, and sincere request. The seventh step makes us let go of this selfishness to give ourselves to others and to God. As we have seen, the emphasis of the seventh step on humility is because without it, we will not truly have sobriety. We will not be happy and fulfilled. We invite you to practice this wonderful step in which we can get out of our problems. To Alcoholics Anonymous and Personal Transformation, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications to receive alerts for our new videos. Together, we can build a community of support and hope. Until next time, and take care.